I am going to do a review probably tomorrow about fairy tale retellings and what I think is good and bad about them and how I think they can handle them. I think I'm going to make it a Melina on writing video, which I know some people are like, when are you going to do another Melina on writing? I'm probably going to do one about writing fairy tale retellings and how I think that they should be constructed and what they should focus on now if we're going for a more modern interpretation of them. But in the meantime, I wanted to do a book review, which is something I haven't done in a really long time, even though that's kind of how I first started, about a book that I really, really enjoyed. I talk about so many things that I don't like and that really annoy me, I find problematic. So let me talk about something that I actually enjoy, which is a book that took me a while to get into in terms of going out and buying, because I really wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy it, if I was going to like it. But then I got a gift card for my Nook, and so I decided, you know, why not? And that book is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. And I had my doubts when this book came out because, you know, it's a Cinderella retelling with cyborgs and androids, and I wasn't really sure how they were going to work with that. I thought it was going to be like really steampunky, and I was just like, I've kind of seen this already. And, you know, honestly, it was so hyped up, I was afraid of it really dropping in quality for me, because that was one of my issues with, that eventually happened with The Hunger Games, which I will review tomorrow. I'm probably going to review Battle Royale and the rest of the Hunger Games series, as well as talking about Melina on writing, but that's not the point anyway. But, so I was kind of apprehensive about giving this book a try, but then I decided, let me just do it. And I am so glad I did. It was a fun read. And I think that's really how I would describe Cinder. It is fun. It is not the most dynamic book, and I'll get into that in a moment, but I feel like the character interactions really, really captivate me. Because most retellings of Cinderella, with the exception of, I think, Ever After, and to a degree, a la Enchanted, suck to me. And it's mainly because they do not create any chemistry between the prince and Cinderella. And the reason why Ever After always stuck out in my mind as being great is not because it's kind of like historical fiction, but because of, despite me knowing that these two people were going to end up together, I was never bored with the story. I actually cared about if those two people were going to end up together because there was actual chemistry between Danielle's character and Henry's character. They showed how their relationship kind of grew. It did have a lot of cliches about the true love and whatever, but it was different. You know, it was telling a similar story, but it gave it a more modern feel. It was really telling a story, but in a more entertaining way, I felt. Cinder manages to be a really interesting retelling of Cinderella with a dash of Sailor Moon thrown into it, which was something I was kind of like, when I first read a review about it that kind of said it had Sailor Moon things, I was like, how do you have Sailor Moon things in it? I'm just kind of like, then I started reading it, and I was like, oh, there it is. Basically, the story takes place in the country of New Beijing, and a deadly plague is infecting the people, nobles, peasants, everyone. So it has no prejudice on a widespread level. And so that has really been hurting people. They're trying to find a way to fix it, but so far no cure has been found. And that's the issue on the ground level. From space, there's the queen of the Lunar Kingdom, and she's been trying to kind of use her army and use her influence to make the planet Earth her own, and trying to basically destroy the Earth and take it over for herself. So it has a little bit of sci-fi mixed into it as well. And the Lunar Kingdom is like, yeah, that's the Sailor Moon part of it. But at the same time, it was just really, like, I just had fun reading it. Like, it would make me giggle because I'm like, oh, Lunar Kingdom. But at the same time, how they made the lunar people was interesting. Like, they basically they're humanoid, but they're almost sublime looking. It's like almost painful to look at them, and they can compel you as a way of kind of like mind control, to use their way to influence your emotions. And that's basically how they're trying to find their way to take over Earth, is by putting themselves into society, putting them into positions. Like the queen herself is trying to marry into a royal family to use that army to start her war, because, you know, she has her own space army, but she wants to have her latches in so that, you know, it's not as hard as a fight if you marry someone in the family. And there are these creatures who are from the lunar world that are susceptible to that glamour that they have. And so what she wants to do, the queen, is kill off these people. So it's this double thing of her trying to commit genocide against a whole kind of sub-race of people, but that sub-race also being treated as parasites on Earth, so there's nowhere for them to go. The biggest flaw with Cinder, I would say, as a book, is its predictability. As another reviewer, Stephanie on Goodreads, pointed out in her own review, the plot twist is painfully obvious as soon as it's mentioned. Like, as soon as you hear about the whole thing, I'm not gonna say it, because as soon as you read it, you're gonna realize what it is. And this was the hardest thing about reading the book for me, was that, because when everyone would talk about it and talk about where is the person and all that, I'd be like, I know the twist already. I already know this is not gonna surprise anyone. And so that to me was the real burning flaw with Cinder, was that predictability. But beyond that, I didn't really have any problems with the book. I mean, the protagonist, Cinder, she was a fun protagonist. She was charming, she was witty, she isn't too stupid to live, so I enjoyed her. The evil stepmother character was really interesting, the little we got to see of her, and how when the plague attacks in her own household, we see a little bit of humanity in her, but we also just see her aggression and anger towards Cinder. Aiko, who was the android, was really adorable, and the writer knew how to use the character sparingly enough that when she would come in, you would enjoy her, but you weren't overrun with her. Because you know how those kind of side characters, you would have to put one-liners and singers and be the side characters come in and they're just too much. In here, it was very sweet, concise. I enjoyed that mainly because of how they limited that character. And then we get Prince Kai. Oh yeah, me gusta. He reminded me in my mind of the prince from the Brandy Cinderella retelling, because the prince in here in the book is Asian because they're in New Beijing, so obviously, but when he described it, it's like, yeah. The most important part to me of telling a Cinderella retelling is making the relationship between the prince and Cinderella work, and this worked. I mean, you know what's gonna happen, you know that they're gonna interact and be fun, but it's just like, their interactions start off small, and they have a little bit of a connection, but they tease each other, and it makes you just really invested in their relationship. It makes you really care about who these people are, what they do. I mean, you want them to be together because they just feel natural. In Cinder, the relationship between the prince and Cinderella works because they're not together because the story needs them to be together. They're together because the characters fit. And that to me was the most important part. And on top of, you know, the class differences that are in Cinderella, it's also another thing because Kai is human and Cinder is a cyborg. It's going to be predictable because it's a fairy tale and it's going to deal with certain issues, and you know certain things have to work out in order. Characters and how they interact make the story strong. Like during the ball scene, I was hyperventilating. Like, because it was just, there was so much stress about what was going on and how stuff had worked out. I'm just kind of like, oh god, how is this going to happen? And when it ended, no, I finally got to the point where I need to be, and I'm just like, how are you going to end like this? How are you going to ruin this to me? And the next book is going to be called Scarlet, and it's going to deal with Little Red Riding Hood kind of as a fairy tale, and it's going to still have Cinder in it, but it's going to interconnect those two fairy tales together, and that to me is kind of like exciting of the storyline. I feel like that's probably going to be for some people what makes it like what they don't want to read and what they do want to read. I say if you're uncertain, it's something that I was like, this is worthy of being on my bookshelf. It has its issues, it has its predictability flaws, it's worked well together. But overall, I say that Cinder was a really, really good read, and I was glad that I gave it a